and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach podcast. I wanted to let you all know that this episode will be airing just past 529 Day. Do you get it? May 29th, 529. It's nice to know that financial aid officers are also capable of dad jokes. Speaking of, Alex Bickford, who, if any of you are watching the video, is here for our first segment. And he is here to discuss, as you might have guessed it, 529 plans. So we'll be turning to him in just a moment. But before we get started, I also wanted to let you know about our second and third segments. I'll be talking with Isabel Bober, who is Dartmouth class of 2004 and actually also a senior associate director there. So we love it when they stick around, as well as Matthew Allender, director of admission at Princeton University. So I'm going to try and goad them into a serious debate about which is better. Obviously kidding about that, both amazing institutions. Rankings are frankly kind of ridiculous, but we will talk about their differences and try and help students listening determine whether they might be a match for those institutions. But for now, back to Alex Bickford and 529 plans and dad jokes. Welcome, Alex.
So it's funny you mentioned dad jokes. We got together as a finance group 2 weeks ago, and I had a colleague email afterwards and was very nice and said it was great to see you last week, and I really appreciated dad jokes. So listen, dad jokes, I think, dad jokes and dad vods, they're the way to go.
Let's embrace it all. And gray hair too. Alex and I started around the same time in 2008. We both had brown hair then, and that's gone by the wayside. We are now old, so that's okay. So let's start though. Let's not assume that everybody knows what a 529 plan is. So just a quick summary of what one is.
So a 529 plan is one of the ways, and probably the most popular way, that the federal government sets up for parents or loved ones of children to save for education. You're allowed to put in money and allow it to grow tax deferred and use it tax free for education. So the biggest benefit of the 529 plan is all the growth that you might have had in a traditional savings vehicle that might be taxed when you go to use it for education is tax free when you use it for education. Just gives you bigger bang for your buck.
Yeah. And then, and so, yes, I just want to highlight this too, because I talk to people regularly who say, well, why should I save for college? Because the colleges are just going to use it against me, basically. And the 529 plan is a protected way to do that.
So parent assets, including the 529 plan, have a very small assessment rate. They ask for 3 to 6% of your assets to go towards the cost of education. So just to kind of give you an idea, if you save $100,000 in a 529 plan, they might ask you for $4,000 of that to go against the financial aid you may have received. $100,000 of income, they're going to ask for $20,000 of that.
Right.
To go against so income is a far bigger factor here in the 529 plan. The way they set that up was specifically designed to not discourage families from saving for college.
All right, great. All right, so now let's dig into the topic of the day. So you did the savings. You put money away, just like we're always hoping people do. So how do you use them? So let's start though with the market is down. There's a lot of volatility. I think people are pretty concerned. Would you hold off on spending your 529 plan, or would you to allow the market to rebound? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
So this is a really personalized question, and it's very dependent on, I would say, the individual. But the first thing I would do is log into your 529 plan. Let's see what the balance is. So let's see what was at a high and let's see where it is now, because depending on how you're invested in the 529 plan, the most popular way to invest is probably in what's called an age-based adjustment option that gets automatically more conservative as your child gets closer to college age. So what I find with a lot of the folks we work with is they'll log into the 529 plan and immediately see, oh, this is not like my 401k that I'm still 20 years away from retirement. I'm actually much closer to using this, so it has not been impacted nearly as much as maybe some of my other accounts have been. And so in that case, people feel a lot more comfortable using the money. Now, if you were in an investment option that was particularly aggressive and did suffer a big downturn, I would say, well, okay, how are you invested now? Are you still in a very aggressive option? Then we would discuss risk tolerance. So sure, does the market have an opportunity to rebound? Absolutely. Does the market have an opportunity to have further recession? Absolutely. And I'm not going to predict which way is
Yeah.
going to go either way and claim that I could. So we just talk about the pros and the cons of waiting and holding it till now. One thing I like to look at, though, is what is your opportunity to use it later beyond this child?
Mhm.
So is this your only child or your last child that's going to go to college? And if that's the case, there's a risk to holding it even beyond the risk of losing more money, which is the risk of what if your child changes their mind and decides that college isn't for them after a semester or a year? Or what if your child gets a nice scholarship and you have money left over? So there are ways to use 529 plans otherwise, and I don't know if that's a segment for another day, but certainly there are other ways to do it, including repaying student loans and even putting some money into a Roth IRA, which is all great. But generally, I'm a fan of let's use the money that we have when we have it and borrow the money that we need when we need it.
Mhm.
So I would say look at your account first. Let's see where the balance is. If it hasn't been as drastically impacted as you might think, I would generally personally be a fan of using it to protect those other reasons why.
Mhm. Mhm. Makes sense, especially with interest rates the way they are, you know?
Exactly. The cost of borrowing is not exactly cheap.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what are the logistics of pulling money from your 529?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways to do that. And it really depends on what you're using it on, but let's just talk about paying the college directly. If you're looking to pay the college directly, you have a number of different options. So one would be to log into your 529 plan, give them the college's information, and they will send the money automatically off to the college. So your hands won't touch the money, your child's hands won't touch the money. It'll go directly to the college. And as long as social security numbers and names match up, that'll be a very clean and simple process. You also have the option of taking money before you pay the college, getting the money to your bank account and turning around and paying the college. You could pay the college and have the money be reimbursed to you. And you actually could have the money go to the beneficiary if you wanted to and have them do that transaction as well. Probably the least of the options that you'd want to do. But there are a number of different ways to do that. It's very simple through all the online platforms the 529 plans have to work that out pretty seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right. So what is a student? What about student indirect costs
Yeah.
like technology? I mean, computers these days, super expensive, off-campus room and board.
Yep.
What
So
about
that would
those?
be, yeah, that would be the other side of the coin, which is less clean in that it's very easy to get the money out. You tell them that you want to take an X amount of dollars out. And what will then happen is the plan sends information off to the IRS that this person has withdrawn this amount of money. They're going to get a message from the school that says this person had this much in qualified expenses. So what tends to happen with the off-campus stuff, the off-campus room and board, or the indirect cost is that you've already withdrawn for tuition over here, but then if you've withdrawn above that, the numbers don't match up.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going to happen is the IRS is just simply going to send you a notification. This will likely be after your tax filing that says, hey, we have a discrepancy here. The college reported that you had $20,000 in costs and you withdrew $30,000. We just need a justification. And that's where holding on to those receipts for the books, for the laptop, or other technology expenses that you had, or rental arrangements, things like that, just come in handy. I had that happen when my son went to school. We took book costs out of the 529 plan, and I had to just send in those receipts, and that was it.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I was a history major. The costs of my books were much, much less than my science major friends,
Ah,
for
sure.
example, and they had additional lab costs sometimes. I mean, most of it was covered or included in the bill for the college, but they definitely had to pay more, kind of in those incidental expenses than I did. So, all right. And so how does a family report this on their taxes?
So actually families don't, this is one of the great things about the 529 plan is that for most families, actually, you never even think about it, is that the school sends information off to the IRS, 1098T it's called, your 529 plan administrator sends information off the IRS. If those things match up, you don't have to report it on your taxes, everything's okay, no harm, no foul there. The time that and so you will actually never report this on your taxes. It would be something that the IRS is going to come back to you and ask you to justify a withdrawal. And if you had a non-qualified withdrawal, that would be when you have to kind of announce that, if you will. So it's about documenting the expenses that you had afterwards if they don't match up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. And what if there's leftover money? Because I think probably a lot of people are concerned, what if I save too much, which is, let's face it, going to be unusual. But you referenced, what if your student drops out or something like that happens, then maybe you do end up with extra.
Yep. So I will say that it is rare, like you said, to talk to somebody who has saved too much. I'm an example of quote unquote over saving. We have an older son who went to a semester of college and decided just that college isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
So we had money left over in the 529 plan. Now, fortunately for us, we have another child. So transferability would be the number one thing. If you have younger children that you want to transfer that money to, it's a very easy transferable asset. It's other family members as well, including siblings, step siblings, half siblings, aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents, first cousins, future generations, all people.
Pretty broad. Okay.
It is. The future generations would be the next thing that I sort of point out is that if you're a parent and are comfortable not having that money as part of your maybe retirement fund or things of that nature, transferring that down to future grandchildren, very, very easy thing to do. A couple other ways that you can use it. One would be that you can, if your student had any student loans that they took while in college, you can withdraw up to $10,000 from there for student loans. And that actually plan, once again, the transferability happens. So let's say you had an older child who had student loans and still has student loans. If you had money left over, you could transfer it up to the older child and have them pay $10,000 towards their student loans. In a new way that's coming out as well, this is brand new, but up to $35,000 from the 529 plan can be deposited into the Roth IRA of the beneficiary of the plan.
Oh, nice.
So that's a really, really nice thing that they've added to really incentivize parents. So, okay, your child had a little bit of money left over, let's start a retirement fund for them. So that's a really new kind of thing and a really unique thing. The last thing I will say is, let's just say all else fails. There's really two other options or three other options. First, I talked to somebody just last year that I thought was super unique and really cool, is that him and his partner were retired. Their last child went through college, had a little bit of money left over, said, we're going to go to Europe. We're enrolling in a culinary school. We're going to learn to cook. And I said, how cool is that? Rare. Most people aren't going to do that, but I thought that was just kind of a really cool and unique opportunity. You can take a scholarship or other student aid withdrawal. So you'll still have to pay the taxes just on the earnings piece, but there's no penalty for the withdrawal. And the last, you could take a pure non-qualified withdrawal, which would be taxed at your ordinary income tax rate and a 10% penalty on the earnings piece. One thing I will say is that that withdrawal can go to either the account owner, who is typically the parent, it could go to the beneficiary, who is typically the student. Student's tax rate, if it typically far less than the parent's tax rate. So you could save a little bit of taxes kind of having your student take that non-qualified withdrawal.
I'll also say that in Connecticut, I mean, my sister, I doubt there's not going to be money left in her 529 account. I should say my sister has a son in college. And my niece, and Alex actually worked with my sister, so he knows her financial situation. But my niece is on the autism spectrum is going to need care for her entire life. And so any money that's left over,
Right.
they can transfer into the account for my niece. So that's another, hopefully not as common of a thing, but, you know, worth
Right.
noting.
The 529 ABLE plan. Right.
Right.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So I always like to make sure people know about that too. All right. Well, I think that is it for today, Alex. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, as always, Sally.
Okay, great. All right. So Alex and I are going to say goodbye for now, and then I will come back and I will be welcoming Matt Allender of Princeton and Isabel Bober of Dartmouth. So we will be right back.